Section 7 of Boyhood by Leo Tolstoy, translated by C.J. Hogarth. This recording is in the public domain. Section 7, chapters 25 through 27. Chapter 25. Woloda's Friends. Although, when in the society of Woloda's friends, I had to play a part that hurt my pride, I liked sitting in his room when he had visitors, and silently watching all they did. The two who came most frequently to see him were a military adjutant called Dubkoff, and a student named Prince Nechludoff. Dubkoff was a little, dark-haired, highly-strung man who, though short of stature and no longer in his first youth, had a pleasing and invariably cheerful air. His was one of those limited natures which are agreeable through their very limitations, natures which cannot regard matters from every point of view, but which are nevertheless attracted by everything. Usually the reasoning of such persons is false and one-sided, yet always genuine and taking; wherefore their narrow egotism seems both amiable and excusable. There were two other reasons why Dubkoff had charms for Woloda and myself, namely, the fact that he was of military appearance, and secondly, and principally, the fact that he was of a certain age, an age with which young people are apt to associate that quality of gentlemanliness which is so highly esteemed at their time of life. However, he was in very truth un homme comme il faut. The only thing which I did not like about it all was that, in his presence, Woloda always seemed ashamed of my innocent behaviour, and still more so of my youthfulness. As for Prince Nechludoff, he was in no way handsome, since neither his small grey eyes, his low projecting forehead, nor his disproportionately long hands and feet could be called good features. The only good points about him were his unusually tall stature, his delicate colouring, and his splendid teeth. Nevertheless, his face was of such an original, energetic character, owing to his narrow sparkling eyes and ever-changing expression, now stern, now childlike, now smiling indeterminately, that it was impossible to help noticing it. As a rule, he was very shy, and would blush to the ears at the smallest trifle. But it was a shyness altogether different from mine, seeing that, the more he blushed, the more determined-looking he grew, as though he were vexed at his own weakness. Although he was on very good terms with Woloda and Dubkoff, it was clearly chance which had united them thus, since their tastes were entirely dissimilar. Woloda and Dubkoff seemed to be afraid of anything like serious consideration or emotion, whereas Nechludoff was beyond all things an enthusiast, and would often, despite their sarcastic remarks, plunge into dissertations on philosophical matters or matters of feeling. Again, the two former liked talking about the fair objects of their adoration. These were always numerous and always shared by the friends in common, whereas Nechludoff invariably grew annoyed when taxed with his love for a certain red-haired lady. Again, Woloda and Dubkoff often permitted themselves to criticize their relatives, and to find amusement in so doing, but Nechludoff flew into a tremendous rage when on one occasion they referred to some weak points in the character of an aunt of his whom he adored. Finally, after supper, Woloda and Dubkoff would usually go off to some place whither Nechludoff would not accompany them, wherefore they called him a "dainty girl." The very first time that I ever saw Prince Nechludoff, I was struck with his exterior and conversation. Yet, though I could discern a great similarity between his disposition and my own, or perhaps it was because I could so discern it, the impression which he produced upon me at first was anything but agreeable. I liked neither his quick glance, his hard voice, his proud bearing, nor, least of all, the utter indifference with which he treated me. Often, when conversing, I burned to contradict him, to punish his pride by confuting him, to show him that I was clever in spite of his disdainful neglect of my presence. But I was invariably prevented from doing so by my shyness. Chapter 26. Discussions. Woloda was lying reading a French novel on the sofa when I paid my usual visit to his room after my evening lessons. He looked up at me for a moment from his book, and then went on reading. This perfectly simple and natural movement, however, offended me. I conceived that the glance implied a question why I had come, and a wish to hide his thoughts from me. I may say that at that period a tendency to attach a meaning to the most insignificant of acts formed a prominent feature in my character. So I went to the table and also took up a book to read. Yet, even before I had actually begun reading, The idea struck me how ridiculous it was that, although we had never seen one another all day, we should have not a word to exchange. "Are you going to stay in tonight, Woloda?" "I don't know." "Why?" "Oh, because—" Seeing that the conversation did not promise to be a success, I took up my book again and began to read. Yet it was a strange thing that, though we sometimes passed whole hours together without speaking when we were alone, the mere presence of a third, sometimes of a taciturn and a wholly uninteresting person, sufficed to plunge us into the most varied and engrossing of discussions. The truth was that we knew one another too well, and to know a person either too well or too little acts as a bar to intimacy. "Is Woloda at home?" came in Dubkoff's voice from the anteroom. "Yes," shouted Woloda, springing up and throwing aside his book. Dubkoff and Nechludoff entered. "Are you coming to the theatre, Woloda?" "No, I have no time," he replied with a blush. "Oh, never mind that. Come along." "But I haven't got a ticket." "Tickets as many as you like, at the entrance." "Very well, then. I'll be back in a minute," said Woloda evasively as he left the room. I knew very well that he wanted to go, but that he had declined because he had no money, and had now gone to borrow 5 roubles of one of the servants, to be repaid when he got his next allowance. "How do you do, Diplomat?" said Dubkoff to me as he shook me by the hand. Woloda's friends had called me by that nickname since the day when Grandmamma had said at luncheon that Woloda must go into the army, but that she would like to see me in the diplomatic service, dressed in a black frock-coat, and with my hair arranged à la coque, the 2 essential requirements, in her opinion, of a diplomat. "Where has Woloda gone to?" asked Nechludoff. "I don't know," I replied, blushing to think that nevertheless they had probably guessed his errand. "I suppose he has no money?" "Yes, I can see I am right, O diplomatist," he added, taking my smile as an answer in the affirmative. "Well, I have none either. Have you any, Dubkoff?" "I'll see," replied Dubkoff, feeling for his pocket and rummaging gingerly about with his squat little fingers among his small change. "Yes, here are 5 kopecks. 20, but that's all," he concluded with a comic gesture of his hand. At this point Woloda re-entered. "Are we going?" "No." "What an odd fellow you are!" said Nechludoff. "Why don't you say that you have no money? Here, take my ticket." "But what are you going to do?" "He can go to his cousin's box," said Dubkoff. "No, I'm not going at all," replied Nechludoff. "Why?" "Because I hate sitting in a box." "And for what reason?" "I don't know. Somehow I feel uncomfortable there." "Always the same. I can't understand a fellow feeling uncomfortable when he is sitting with people who are fond of him. It is unnatural, mon cher." "But what else is there to be done, si je suis tant timide? You never blushed in your life, but I do at the least trifle," and he blushed at that moment. "Do you know what that nervousness of yours proceeds from?" said Dubkoff in a protecting sort of tone. "D'un excès d'amour propre, mon cher." "What do you mean by excès d'amour propre?" asked Nechludoff, highly offended. "On the contrary, I am shy just because I have too little amour propre. I always feel as though I were being tiresome and disagreeable, and therefore—" "Well, get ready," Woloda interrupted Dubkoff, tapping my brother on the shoulder and handing him his cloak. "Ignaz, get your master ready." "Therefore," continued Nechludoff, "it often happens with me that—" But Dubkoff was not listening. Tra-la-la-la, and he hummed a popular air. "Oh, but I'm not going to let you off," went on Nechludoff. "I mean to prove to you that my shyness is not the result of conceit. You can prove it as we go along. But I have told you I am not going. Well, then, stay here and prove it to the diplomat, and he can tell us all about it when we return." "Yes, that's what I will do," said Nechludoff, with boyish obstinacy. "So hurry up with your return." "Well, do you think I am egotistic?" he continued, seating himself beside me. True, I had a definite opinion on the subject, but I felt so taken aback by this unexpected question that at first I could make no reply. "Yes, I do think so," I said at length, in a faltering voice, and colouring at the thought that at last the moment had come when I could show him that I was clever. "I think that everybody is egotistic, and that everything we do is done out of egotism." "But what do you call egotism?" asked Nechludoff, smiling, as I thought, a little contemptuously. "Egotism is a conviction that we are better and cleverer than any one else," I replied. "But how can we all be filled with this conviction?" he inquired. "Well, I don't know if I am right or not. Certainly no one but myself seems to hold the opinion. but I believe that I am wiser than any one else in the world.